Now then, going into the events of the book of Revelation, chapters 4 to 22, events which must be after the church is taken out of the world. As I said before, if you will realize that these events are plain, literal descriptions of events to come to pass, and do not make those events typical or symbolic or figurative, as the average Bible student does, you will have no difficulty whatsoever. I'm not going to emphasize in connection with every one of these events that this is literal, but I just want to get you to think of this every time you read anything. Could this not be taken as literal as it reads? If so, then take it as literally as you read. For after all, the one fundamental principle of interpretation of the Bible must be learned sooner or later if we are going to get a simple knowledge of the Bible. And that principle is this: take the Bible literally wherein it is at all possible. When the language cannot be taken literally, then you know the language is figurative. Then get the literal truth conveyed by the figurative language. With that in mind, as you read any place in the Bible, just ask yourself the question, couldn't this be literal? If so, then take it that way, unless you find some explanation in the Scripture itself or some other passage that it's not to be taken in a literal sense. Now we know from the book of Daniel that those land animals that come out of the water, we know that has to be literal. For lions and leopards and bears do not live in water. They're not water creatures. So when the prophet saw land animals coming out of the water, then you know right away the language must be figurative. When we read of a woman in Revelation 12 clothed with a sun, standing on a moon, having 12 stars on her head, we know right away that that language must be figurative, must be symbolic. Couldn't be literal, for no literal woman could be clothed with the sun. No little woman 5 feet 2 inches tall could stretch her body out to stand on the sun and stand on the moon, reach the sun, and to be clothed with it. You know right away the language is figurative. So get the literal truth conveyed by the figurative language. Do that with all these events of the book of Revelation in the seals, the trumpets, and the vials, the 2 witnesses, the sun-clothed woman, the beast, or any of these events in the book of Revelation. And there will not be one thing hard for you to understand about any of the events which must take place after the churches. Just one more thing now I want to mention before going into chapter 6 to 22. That is the living creatures of chapter 4. That passage, or that description, is a description of literal angelic beings. But it sounds in verse 10 as if they were redeemed creatures. But instead of reading, "Thou hast redeemed us by thy blood," read this way: "Thou hast redeemed them by thy blood, out of every kindred, tongue, people, and nation. Made them unto our God kings and priests, and they shall reign on the earth." Them, who's referred to? In verse 8, we read of the saints whose prayers are offering up before God. So the living creatures are angelic beings. Take every other thing in the whole 4th and 5th chapters as being literal with the exception of the Lamb.